Well, welcome everybody to another edition of our continuing education series. My name's Dave Gordon, Executive Director of the National Sports Media Association. We're talking coaches and media relationships. Always fun to talk this. We did it a couple years ago at our awards weekend. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., which sponsors our continuing education series. And we'd like to welcome in our two panelists for today, Head Coach Mack Brown of the University of North Carolina. Coach Brown, always good to see you. And Angelique Chengelis of the Detroit News, not the Free Press. I made a boo-boo on one of the graphics. Angelique is the beat writer for covering the University of Michigan. Angelique, welcome to you. Why don't we start with, I think most people know Coach Brown and your story. Angelique, just give us your story, if you would, as briefly as possible, and then we'll dive in.
In 140 characters like Twitter?
280 now.
I'll try. Was it 280? I don't even know anymore. Angelique Chengelis. I've been working for the Detroit News since the end of 1990. I'd worked, I'm from Cincinnati, went to the University of Cincinnati, and interned up here in Detroit. And then my first job was in Knoxville covering Pat Summitt and the Lady Vols for about 4 years. And then moved back here, and I started covering Michigan football in 1992. And auto racing, and I've covered everything else around here, but those were my two primary beats. And I've done a couple of years of Michigan basketball, but Michigan football, I think, is, as you probably guess, is a pretty big deal here. So that's been all consuming, especially with the 24/7 news cycle these days.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to dive in, Coach Brown. You came over to the dark side for a while with ESPN. What did you learn from your time as a broadcaster?
Well, first, welcome Angelique. She helped me so much with Michigan football. And when I was trying to find something unique to say on Saturday afternoon, I would direct message her or call her and say, help, who's the starting quarterback? What are they going to do? How are they going to look? So I jumped into media very quickly. It was a great experience for me. The thing I learned, I think, first is you have very difficult jobs, and coaches don't realize that. I'm not sure a lot of coaches can respect the job you do because you're in some ways a threat, and you're always looking behind the scenes at them and what are they doing? What are they doing wrong? And you're a critic, so you're being critical of coaches, and coaches by and large don't like that. They want perfection. They want everything to be right. And what I learned is that not only do you have very difficult jobs, but you've got to find something that somebody wants to read that's unique and different, and you have to do it every day. And it's really hard. And you've got to try to get inside these programs where coaches are trying to tighten them up like a vault and not let you in. And then you've got to try to be accurate and professional. And then you've got to be timely. And then you've got to have a relationship with the coach at a time where you have to be critical of him. And that's very unique. It's very tricky. I also always felt like, and I think this is key to today, that to me, when I got frustrated with the writer, it was because they did something cute that really didn't affect anything, or they took a cheap shot over nothing. If I did something wrong and you reported it and you were accurate, I was good. I could handle it. I could take my lick and say, you're exactly right. I wish we hadn't done it that way. Here's how I'd change it. But if it's cute for nothing and making fun of a person, I think you lose value with that person in the coach's mind, and you gain nothing. So the short-term advice, Dave and Angelique, I would give this group early is don't take cheap shots or do something cute, because Twitter's bad for cheap shots and cute. And a lot of times if you're not careful in a press conference now, it's so much tougher on you because a coach will throw something out and you'll tweet it, and then by the end of the conversation, it's not what you thought it was going to be. So you've tweeted something inaccurate, and you all want to be accurate. And that's the other thing I learned. Writers are good people. You have hard jobs. You're trying to make a living. And even with me doing Friday night games and doing every Saturday TV from noon till midnight, it's hard to find good stuff. It's hard to find good stuff to say, and it's hard to be accurate and get people to read your stuff when you're not embellishing it. So it really, it's helped me now. I always wanted to help media do their job. I always respected the position, but not like I do now. I fully respect what you do, and I usually start every press conference now with lesser to say because I want to get what you need. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you want, and tell me what you need for your story, and I'll help you do it. Where before I was told, try to give them all the information before they start asking questions, and then there'll be fewer questions. Well, I found out my answers may not be to your questions. So I've learned that, Angelique, what do you want? Richard, tell me what you want. And also, I say I don't want you being cute with me or putting me down. Coaches have a bad way of looking down at writers and being short with you and acting, rolling their eyes and acting like it was a bad question. I would never do that again, because there's not a stupid question and there's not a bad question, because it may be what I say and what you hear may be two different things. And that's the other thing. I'm trying to be more careful with how I say something and going back over it to say, here's what I said. Now here's what I meant. Let's just make sure we get what I meant instead of just what I said. And Dave, that's rambling a little bit when I said I wasn't going to ramble, but
that's okay.
That's what I felt in my 5 years without question coming away.
Angelique, one of the most important parts of this relationship is establishing trust, kind of what Mack just talked about, on both sides, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, Mack made a lot of great points. And I just want to go back really quick, Dave. I mean, one of them is I don't like snark either. And I think that Twitter and social media, that has really encouraged being snarky and quick and kind of mean-spirited. And I don't like mean-spirited. And I think, and Mack's absolutely right. If there's a problem, I think you can point it out in a very reasonable, reasoned way. And that doesn't affect a relationship. It's because it's honest, it's authentic. And also the whole thing about taking things out of context and tweeting. And I'm actually now in favor of no more tweeting live during press conferences. I think it's rude because the coach is seeing the top of our head most of the time because we're typing, but it also affects the flow of information exchange. And like yesterday, Jim Harbaugh finally talked to us for the first time since the bowl game. And something he said that was very interesting about COVID was taken out of context in a tweet. And I don't think the reporter intended it that way, but that it became very much an issue yesterday about that. But going to your point, Dave, yes, it's, I've covered 5 coaches at Michigan and Lloyd Carr the longest, 13 years. And I thought we had a really good relationship and we're very good friends now. We text all the time. And I think that, there were times I did things he didn't like, but we trusted each other. And he knew that I wasn't out there I don't like gotcha journalism. And I think Mack alluded to that also. Just this whole thing of being cute just to be cute and to try to trap a coach. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's a reasonable way to deal with anybody, not even just a head coach, just anybody. I don't like that whole approach. And I think a coach who is very aware of media relations will pick up on that, I think, and develop a sense of trust and will tell you information then that you can use later. And that's how I've tried to work with all the coaches. I'll tell you, Jim Harbaugh is a very tough guy to cover. He's the hardest guy I've covered, but it's also in a lot of ways been most rewarding because he's such a challenge and he's made me think out of the box, ways to ask questions. And he and I have had a couple little tiffs, I would call them. I think we have an understanding of each other, but I think trust is a hard thing to get, but you do have to earn it with anybody, and especially with a head football coach at a major Division I school in particular.
Mack, it kind of seems to me that our job as media is to get information. A lot of times coaches, and for obvious reasons, you don't want to give that information out. You obviously don't want to tip off an opponent as to what you're doing. Our job is to kind of tell our readers and our viewers and our listeners what you're doing. So it's a bit of a balancing act there. How do you go about, and you have dozens of media who cover your program on a regular basis, it's tough to establish that trust with that many people, is it not?
It really is. And the other thing I learned is that if there's 40 media covering you and you don't trust 2 of them, it affects what you say to the other 38. I mean, it's a very difficult thing. Or if you don't like them, or if you're mad at them, it makes it more difficult. So what I actually do is sit down with our sports information director before Jeremy Sharp, before we would have a press conference. And I did this at Texas. And I said, Jeremy, tell me, I don't have enough time really to get on the internet and study the hot topics and all that. I said, tell me what the writers are being asked by their readers, and tell me what questions that I can answer to help them. And then I try my best to explain what I feel like has to happen in the game for us to win, without giving away game plans. And now I wouldn't have done this at Texas, but now I say, here are things we are doing well, and here are things that I'm concerned about we've got to fix. And at Texas, because of what Angelique just said, that the press conferences were big enough and the stage was big enough, a lot of people would make fun of what you said, not even being accurate, or people would attack something and they weren't accurate. And I didn't have enough time to after every press conference to go say, you missed it. Here's what I meant. Maybe I didn't say it right, and maybe it wasn't their fault, but they missed it. So now what I'm really trying to do is be accurate, be very direct in a positive way, but a natural way, and not look at one person differently than the other. So if I don't like someone as much and they ask me a question, professionally, I owe them the same professionalism of someone I like. And Angelique is exactly right for all of you. If you can get not close to a coach, but trust, be able to communicate with a coach where you can ask a question and get an honest answer. And if he says it's off the record, which every coach is told never to do now, because it's never off the record, because Angelique will take it and tell her buddy, and then the buddy leaks it. And, you know, that's the paranoia that coaches have. And if you ever do that to one, you'll lose that trust.
And one of the things that, especially when Lloyd was head coach at Michigan, it's really important, and it's different now with Jim Harbaugh. We call it Fort Schembechler. I mean, it's really, but before, Lloyd was very much, let us talk to his assistant coaches. So I would talk to the assistant coaches, I mean, all the time. And it was definitely just to share information. And for that exact anecdote that Mack just shared, just to say, I'll ask about a certain player and they'll give me insight into it. And then it's using their information, but spinning it the way I would and describing it. And it's informative to the audience, and they know why Mack Brown isn't playing well or hasn't gotten enough snaps. And it's not, the coach, the assistant coach knows that he or she's giving you this information to do this. So I think it's very important not only to develop a very good trust relationship with the head coach, but if you can do so with assistant coaches as well, you can really get a lot of insight into more specific position battles and development than you can from a head coach who doesn't always, know all the specifics like the position coaches do.
Angelique, that is so true. And it's one of the reasons a lot of head coaches decide they don't want the assistants to talk to you,
right?
Because they'll be afraid it's a different message. And I really want our assistant coaches to talk to you and get to, number one, I want them to become head coaches.
That's right.
And this is great preparation for them to understand that they've got to be prepared and they need to handle questions. They can't be sensitive. And Lloyd was the best. He's one of my dearest friends. And I think it goes back to who's got a good heart and who wants to do things right, and who cares. And he was that way there. I think the other thing that's very interesting, Dave, is some coaches are paranoid that have things to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, and I don't, I always want to go by the rules. I want to do what's right. I want to be fair. I want to be consistent. You're a lot more relaxed in a press conference than if you're going in saying, "Oh my gosh, I hope they don't ask me this." And if you have to sit there and say, "What if they ask me this? What am I going to say?" And I also feel like I'm at a stage in my life where I'm not going anywhere else. I'm having fun. I'm staying here. And a lot of these guys are wanting another job, or they're afraid they're going to lose the one they've got. So they're really afraid to answer questions honestly, because somebody might get mad at them or a booster might get mad. And really and truly, remember this too, folks. You're talking to a board of regents when you're talking to you. You're talking to a president. You're talking to a legal counsel. You're talking to the president's PR person. You're talking to your athletics director. You're talking to all your assistant coaches and their wives. You're talking to all your players and their moms and dads. You're talking to all your top boosters, and you're talking to all your grassroots people, and you're talking to media. We always had the fight in Austin. Should you treat the local media better than the national media? And you get more publicity out of the national media, but the local media hated it. And then we got Longhorn Network, and oh my gosh, everybody hated it. And I didn't have any choice. They didn't ask me if we were going to have Longhorn Network. So I do think that going back to what Angelique said, talk to them, ask them questions, and get to know them as people, because coaches have a good heart, but they've got this little thing on their shoulder that says, don't trust the media. And it's ingrained very young. And if one media person burns them, then it's everybody. And that's just not fair.
We had the situation right here in Winston-Salem a few years ago. Part of my radio crew burned Dave Clawson. And to Dave's credit, those of us who show up at his weekly press conferences after the formal part's over, he'll grab his lunch and sit down with 6 or 8 of us and go completely off the record. But the background that we get from that is invaluable. I think we're all aware, at least those of us who've been practitioners in this industry for a while, of the time commitments that coaches are under, and and just the time pressure, especially in season. How do we get to the point, and maybe go back to the point where once upon a time the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Sports Media Association, did a 3-day golf outing up in the North Carolina mountains? I know you've been to it, Mac, where the coaches and media got to know each other on a more personal rather than working basis. And I think that helped, but it seems no one has the time to do that anymore. Is there a way to get back to that in any way, shape, or form?
Dave, probably not, because of the early signing date. Now, recruiting is year-round. We had a staff meeting this morning. We're talking about 23s, guys that are freshmen in high school. And I said, guys, tell me what he's going to look like in 3 years. He's a 6'4", 265-pound lineman. Give me his grades. He's been through a freshman year. Give me his character. Is he going to be tough? Is he going to compete? So, but we're being forced to do that. And assistant coaches year-round are out recruiting. Now we're having official visits in the spring. So it's changed so much. I do think one thing, and I'd like Angelique's thought here, Dave, is it was very beneficial to have a 30-minute meeting with you before we had the press conference. And then I could go over what I was going to say. I could go over why I was going to say it, why we were doing certain things. I let you ask questions during this meeting. It was off the record. But it was very helpful for you to prepare. It was very helpful for you to know where to go. And it also took care of the tweeting aspect, because you could be prepared to tweet because you knew what I was going to say better than not saying it. So that's one thing. If the head coach would take an extra 20 minutes before you start in a live press conference and just kind of have a walkthrough, because I get in a hurry. I've got 30 minutes, I've got 45 minutes, and I'm going to go fast, and you're not going to get everything, and you may not know what I'm talking about. And that's the danger of writing about something and you're not sure what I meant. It's not good for you or me. So his people said, let's sit down. Let's talk about where we're going with this thing. If you've got a question, Angelique can ask me now. Mack, why are you doing this? Well, here's why, and you help me with this part, but here's why I'm doing it, and here's what I'm going to say in the press conference. And it was really healthy, and it was healthy for everybody. And we didn't say we were doing it. We didn't talk to anybody about it, but it pretty much helped everybody get started. And Dave, I've thought a lot about what you just said, and I have so many friends in the media now. I've probably got more friends in the media than I've gotten coaching, really being out 5 years. But I'm not sure that coaches will take enough time because they've got to raise money. They've got their booster trips along with the recruiting. And then that day off, the wife wants them to take them somewhere. So I'm just not sure that we'll be able to get back to where we were with those golf tournaments.
Or maybe coaches just shouldn't get married.
Yeah, I'm sure not going there.
Angelique, talk a little bit if you will. I just said talk about, see?
All right.
The talk about, the dreaded talk about. Something like this where we are willing to open it up, and if coaches have time, where, whether it's a coaches convention, a media convention, if we could set something up like this, how helpful would that be?
I think it would be great. And, I'll use my more recent example of Jim Harbaugh, that when his first year, he actually did a round table with all the beat writers and all the bloggers, and he had us fill out a sheet, just some kind of get to know you questions. And we exchanged, we just told stories, whatever. And that was helpful, but that was, 6 years ago now, 5 years ago. And I love what Mack said. I think that's great, but I just think the time constraints are just, they're so intense. I'm seeing the time with Harbaugh has shrunk. We would get other coaches, Brady Hoke, Rich Rodriguez, a couple times a week. Now we talk to Jim Harbaugh for, I think, about 12 or 13 minutes on Monday, and then after a football game. And, he doesn't even do his radio show in public anymore. He does it in-house at Schembechler Hall. So the time is really shrinking with him, and I get it. He's saving time. He doesn't want to be in a car going here and there. He's got recruiting to do. He's got important things to do. But I think the one thing that we're taking from this pandemic in terms of football is that every coach I've talked to at Michigan said this format, using Zoom calls, has really allowed them to get to know the recruits better. They've gotten to know their current players better. And I think it would be a really, welcome tool this way with media to kind of establish a little bit of a better understanding of where we come from, where they come from. And, but most of the Zoom calls with coaches are very controlled still. You have to submit a question, and if they call on you, you can ask. It's not open and free like this. So, I wish we could do that. I covered NASCAR forever, and I remember years and years ago at Michigan International Speedway, they did Dale Earnhardt, the Intimidator, never really did a lot of media stuff, but he loved fishing. So they set up a media fishing outing with us and Dale Earnhardt. And I got to know Dale Earnhardt that day because we went fishing, and we always then communicated after, when I'd see him at races because of that. And it was really helpful. And they see you as a human being. And this is touches on what Mack said early on, that, as a head coach sees me as a human and a normal person, not just as the enemy ink-stained wretch, but I see him as a human and understand. Like Lloyd Carr had a great interest in opera, and he loved words. He loved learning about words. He kept a dictionary outside of his office, and every time a player would go see him, he'd make that player find a word, learn about the word, and then go in and tell Lloyd about it so Lloyd could learn another word. So, I like those different elements. And I wish that Jim Harbaugh, he always falls back on, I don't want to pull back the onion. So he doesn't really want to share too much of who he is. And I think that's a shame, because I think he's a really interesting guy and has a lot of interesting insights. But I think there's some coaches who would prefer to keep it, very standoffish a little bit.
And Angelique, what we learned with the pre-press conference, the walkthrough, it made the press conference go faster.
Yes.
So it actually
That's
saved
critical.
And I knew your question better, so I was better prepared to answer it. And in some cases, you didn't even want to ask it because you'd already gotten the answer. So you get something else that was more important. But we've also found that during the pandemic, we had high school coaches clinics every week with up to 1,000 coaches. That was wonderful.
Wow.
That we couldn't have had once a week if we hadn't. We've been able to get on with our top boosters and talk to them about how we're handling things and what's going on. We couldn't have gotten all of those powerful people together in the same room, but we can with Zoom. And we've done our press conferences where we'll just say, listen, we're going to have one Thursday at noon. Get your questions ready, and we've got an hour, but we'll take 30 minutes. We'll take whatever you want. But it has taught us that there's a lot better ways to communicate than when we were this way before. We've all got our media days coming up. Are we going to have them if we move the fall back and don't play non-conference games? Are we only going to talk about COVID? Are you going to talk about your teams? I mean, are we going to talk about how we're handling COVID? I mean, so we're all going through different times now, but Zoom, WebEx, all of the different Skype, FaceTime, all of the different things have made it where if you need me, you can actually get to me much easier. We have a press conference on Monday. I have a live radio show that I'd never done before, but they do it at Carolina, so I was going to do it at a restaurant on Monday night. And then I talk after practice on Wednesday and then after the game. And then what I try to do is get an hour every Thursday where anyone that needs something taped or has a question, I've got that hour set apart so I can talk to media from 1 to 2 on Thursday. And everybody knows that's what we do. So they'll actually call and say, can I get Mack for 15 minutes on the window on Thursday? And so it makes it easy for us. It's organized, and it's easier to talk to anybody at any time that you want to, because where I get disorganized is if we don't have a set time. And Jeremy says, can you talk to somebody today at 1? I said, no, man, I got 8 things at 1. But if I'm organized and I put this time apart, then it makes it easy for me.
And talking about Jeremy, go ahead, Angela.
Oh no, I was just speaking of Mack's, the walkthrough before the press conference. One thing that they did when Brady Hoke was head coach at Michigan, which I thought was really effective, is he would stand at the podium for 10 minutes and give TV sound bites, and then we'd go to a round table, so there's no camera, and I thought it was much more comfortable, and we really got the breeze there a lot. I mean, we asked questions, but it was much looser and no TV cameras, because I think, and I keep saying I think that would be a much better outlet for Jim Harbaugh. I don't think he performs that well with a camera, and I think he would really benefit from a roundtable situation. And I think we all do. I don't like hearing my voice. I like when someone hands me a microphone at a press conference. I hate the whole microphone thing. I think it's awkward, and I think it also wastes time instead of just shooting a question out. And I think the roundtable just made everybody more comfortable. And I think that it sounds a little bit like the walkthrough in a way, but I just think that's a good way to go.
And Angelique and Dave, the other problem with TV is you're talking to recruits. Mm-hmm. You're not answering your question. I always said, whatever question I get, I'm going to answer it for a recruit or a mom or a high school coach. And when I got to ESPN, I said that they said, well, sometimes you do coach speak. I said, yeah. Why'd they name it that way? That's what coaches do. Why didn't you go for 2 at the end why'd you go for 2 at the end of the Clemson game? Well, I liked the way our team played. We were prepared. The coaches had everybody ready to go. We had our opportunities, and Clemson's the best team in the country. So to get within 1 point of them, I'm so proud of our team. Don't answer the question. And that's the TV problem, because you're talking to someone else. You're not answering your question.
That's a good point.
All right, let's move to Matt Krause. Matt, go ahead.
All right, Dave, thanks so much for organizing this. Coach, hope you're doing well. Matt Krause here with the women's basketball program at Carolina. Question for you. In an informal setting, as in not a post-game press conference, let's say. So let's say you're a Monday night radio show at Topo, or whether you're doing a sort of a profile interview with a print reporter. What are the types of questions that you wish were asked more often to try and better tell the story of your program?
Matt, number one, I really appreciate your coach. Courtney's a superstar, and most people have already seen it, but the ones that haven't are going to. She is after it. She's full speed ahead. So I really like her. Matt, I would like more questions about our players. What did we do well enough in the game to win if we won, and if we lost, why did we lose? I would like to really get the fans to go behind the scenes and understand more about the game. You know, why didn't you play Daz Newsome more? You're not going to answer that one. Coach, what'd you do really well, and what do you wish you'd done differently? What could you have done to win the game that you didn't? If you had to play the game over again, what would you change? Those would be the questions I would like, because that's what I really question myself every Sunday. What did we do well? What could have won the game? What should have? Would you do the same things again and do them better? Those I'd like direct, specific questions about the game, because you can brag on players, and you're going to, but again, you're not going to be critical of your players or your staff. So, a coach, you went for 4th and 2 with 8 minutes left. Why? And that helps me, because it makes my mind tell the audience what I was really thinking and why. And I like that. I like being able to say, here's why we did it. And we have a plan, and we had a reason. And I want you to know why we did it. May not agree with me. That's okay. But here's why we did it. And those are I'd rather have those questions than just the fluff questions. I had a question this year. Why do you wear a navy blue jersey on the sideline when it's hot? A navy blue shirt on the sideline when it's hot. And the answer was our coaches wanted to wear navy in the first game against South Carolina. We won, so we were afraid to change. It was the least thing on my mind. But questions like that are just, I think they're fun maybe, but a waste of time for the real football fan. And I want the radio show to be for the real football fan.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Jordan Black, if you would unmute, ask your question. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Coach. I'm first off a proud Carolina alum from 2016, and I worked in recruiting in the office for the running backs coaches at the time. There were Coach Porter and Coach Jordan. But thanks for doing this. My question, I'm a sports anchor in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and unlike a lot of you all who are beat writers, you all kind of build these relationships over the long term. My job is a little bit more of a revolving door. This is my second market, and I have hopes of moving up throughout the sports reporting world. So how can I best build relationships with coaches when I don't have as much of a long-standing one, and I don't get as much interaction because I haven't been around as long?
Yeah, first, and I'm going to let Angelique answer first, Jordan, but Randy Jordan played for me, and I love him to death. He's like a stepson, and Larry Porter worked with me at Texas. So I know both of those. Angelique, what advice would you give Jordan?
You know, Jordan, that's a really great question. I'm actually really pleased that you asked that, because, I'm at Michigan 3 or 4 times a week, and you see a reporter from this TV station once every couple of weeks. And if it's a big game, if it's Ohio State, you see everybody there. And you're right, it is much tougher if you're not there all the time. And your job, you do have to be a jack of all trades. You have to cover every other team. You're not a beat writer. You're not focused on that team. I think it's probably helpful to befriend one of the beat writers and give you a little more insight into what's going on. And I would contact the sports information director weekly and just say, hey, you know, what's the news? Is there, is there a player I can talk to, an interview I can do, a coach I can talk to, and just make sure you're present, because you can't be present physically all the time. That's just not the nature of your job. But it's really nice to hear that you want to develop those relationships, because I know I don't see it that often at Michigan. It's, you know, people swooping in and swooping out, and they do a really nice job, but it sounds like you want to be more in depth. And I think people would be very receptive to that at say UNC or at Arkansas, if you're going over there. And I think they'd be happy to help you and to get to know them better.
Thank you.
And I think, Jordan, also, if you could do at some point, they would let you do an individual interview with a coach. You get to know them better. And you walk in, you introduce yourself, and you give them 3 to 5 minute interview, and you're prepared, and you ask the really good questions. Coaches like that. They like to be asked really good questions, and that's important. So I think that also would build your time with them.
And to Mack's point, I mean, coaches do, and I'm telling you, I don't keep meaning to bring up Jim Harbaugh, but that's who I'm covering. He does make you ask a really good question. If I said to Mack, hey, do you think it's sunny out? Mack would probably answer and say, yeah, it's really hot. It's been this. Jim will say yes or no. I mean, he will not give you anything else. So you have to craft your question in a way that he is going to answer it. And I spent a lot of my time at the press conferences really thinking about how to ask a question that I know he has to answer, that he can't get away with a yes or no, because some coaches like Mack are nice and would probably, indulge me if I asked a yes or no, but he's not. So just to that point, I just thought you do have to really ask good questions and not give them an out either.
Yeah, that's important for everybody. Don't waste a coach's time, because if you do ask a bad one, he's probably going to say and move on. And the next time you ask one, he may not look at you as professional as he would have before. So I think that's a big part of this.
Dallas Cole, are you there? Dallas. Going once, going twice. Dallas? All right, we tried. Kelly Burke, go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Sure. Thanks, Coach Brown and Angelique, for doing this. Dave, can you guys hear me?
Sure
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. And Coach Brown, by the way, please make sure you tell Phil and Tanya Longo I said hello. They're old friends of mine from their SIU days back years ago.
Right.
My questions for both of you, though. We have situations as journalists, whether it be a season that's, going tough, not a lot of wins, or maybe a coach's job is on the line. What are both of your recommendations for the best ways to effectively but respectfully ask a tough question of a coach?
Angelique?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I try to ask some tough questions, even when the season's going okay. But let me give you an example. And I will say, I think Harbaugh intimidates a lot of people. He does the stare. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a shark eye stare at you. And he tries to make you unstable. And I think that really keeps a lot of people from asking questions. But they got blown out at Wisconsin last year in the Big Ten opener. And I asked a couple tough questions. And I think a coach respects a tough questions. If it's not, you're clearly not going for a gotcha answer, and he answered it very thoughtfully and better than I thought. I was actually really surprised how well he answered it, and, didn't get sharp with me. He knew they got beaten badly. And I asked a follow-up, and he was really good about it. And I think, I think that's part of establishing this trust with a coach, that I think as long as he or she knows that you're not trying to undermine them in any way. As Max said earlier, as long as you're asking him why this happened, he's willing to give you that response and to explain and to take it on himself. Usually, I mean, I think that's my experience with head coaches, is they're not going to throw anybody under the bus. So I think that those kind of questions should be asked and can be asked. I've covered bad Michigan seasons, quite a few. And, I'll tell you, sometimes after a loss, I remember Pat Summitt after a loss was always much more interesting and thoughtful in her responses than after a win, because it's a cliche and coaches say it all the time, but they learn more from a loss than they do from a win. And I think that they are receptive to asking questions after a loss, as long as you're not sounding accusatory or demanding. So I don't know, Mack, maybe you've got a different opinion on that.
Well, Kelly, I think Angelique's exactly right. You've got to remember, right after a game, the coach is completely exhausted. He's trying to figure out what happened, good or bad. Somebody sticks a stat sheet in front of you and you're looking at it. You've talked to your team, you've talked to radio, and then you're walking into a press conference with only a sheet of paper, trying to figure out what really happened. And if you're lost, you're so disappointed because part of you is taken away. And head coaches blame themselves. They don't tell you that, but you're responsible. So they feel awful. And there's a certain amount of depression with losing, and then they're shorter, and they're not in a great mood by any means. So I think understanding that, what Angelique said is so true. I would never say, Coach, this is a hard question, because that makes it look like he can't handle it, but you're preparing him for it. I would just say, I would have it short, I would have it sweet, and I would have it direct. Just like Angelique said, if you lose 48-0 to Wisconsin, you're going to know in your mind what was wrong. And if you ask, Coach, help us with what you saw happen. Help us with 48-0. That's not a bad question. If you say you're in your fourth year at Michigan and you haven't beaten Wisconsin but one time and you've lost Ohio State every time, what does this do to your future? That's a nasty question, and you won't get an answer.
Yeah, that was actually sort of asked last year, and he did not. He got very sharp with it. But also to Mack's point, Kelly, a short question. I'm a big fan of short questions. I mean, there's no need to do a preamble and to set up the coach. And I also don't like the question when someone says, well, Mack, do you think you should keep your job or shouldn't you? I mean, you just can't give them you let them answer the question. And I think a shorter question is always the best, and he or she will answer it. I think I always found coaches have answered, always.
Yeah. And Kelly, you've also got to realize that I'm exhausted. The longer you talk, the less I listen.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
Angelique's right. Hit me with a question and I'll hit you with the answer, because I'm ready to go take a shower and get on the plane to go home. We just got our tail kicked. I'm not happy, but I'm going to do my job. I'm going to be professional. You ask me a question, you'll probably get a more direct answer after a loss, and when you're got a good direct question, than after a win, like Angelique said, because I've thought about it more. If we win, I'm happy and everything's great and patting everybody on the head and great job, glad everybody got to play. And so you haven't put a lot of thought into it. When you lose, between the point you talk to your team and the time I get to you, I've put a lot of thought into what happened, because I'm trying to figure it out. Where did we miss it? Was it Tuesday's practice? Was it we didn't run the ball well enough? So my mind is working, and really and truly I'm working through it while I'm answering your question. And that's why some coaches look like they ramble. You're actually trying to get there. Mm-hmm. And it is rambling, but it's a process in your mind right now of saying, we didn't run the ball. I mean, we got 42 yards rushing. You can't win games in the Big Ten rushing for 42 yards. And a lot of people don't like stats. But if a coach says we turned it over 4 times and we gained none, you're not going to win any games if you lose 4 turnovers and gain none. And he's mad because they lost 4 turnovers. And people would say, well, that's coach speak. It's really not. It's facts. So you have to be careful, too, that when a coach gives you a direct fact about what happened in the game, that you don't think it's coach speak. Because usually when I'd sit there on TV, every game I could say 4 turnovers to 2. That's a story. And they'd say, no, you got to give them more. I said, it's facts. What do you mean? There's no more. He dropped the ball 4 times. You threw 4 interceptions. You're not going to win games if you throw interceptions. But it needs to be different than that. You got to give him more than that. But the coach, that's who he is. The coach is, I talk about turnovers ratio all week, and we didn't do it. That's a fact. We can call the press conference off. You lose 4 turnovers in game 2, you're not going to win. So what? The rest of it doesn't matter. Now, why did you have the turnovers? That's a great question. Why you haven't been a turnover type team? You had them today. Why? And that's a great question, because then he'll say we didn't run the ball well enough on 1st and 2nd down. We had 3rd and long. Quarterback was under pressure. Ball was tipped. Too many interceptions. We've got to do a better job on 1st and 2nd down to get to a 3rd and manageable. Those are the great questions, and that's the answer that you want to get back.
When you made the transition from the sideline of the studio, was there a coach to whom you looked up, who you considered a role model, as someone who did that before you and was good at it?
Early, I studied Dick Vermeil. I studied a Mike Godfrey. I would look at Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit. I love Todd Blackledge. He's a coach's son, and he has this amazing way of telling you what's happening and being critical without being critical. I thought he was so good. Bob Greasy. Bob Greasy was so good and smooth and he had a way of telling a story. So I really looked at a lot of those guys to try to figure out who I wanted to be, who I was most like, number one, and what my style would be like if I was more like this person. And because it was really important to me to try to take you behind the scenes. I thought my worth to the media was to take people where they couldn't go, because that's where I'd been. And I'm not a writer, so I wasn't going to write. I'm not just a critic, so I'm not going to just go on and be critical all the time. But what I could do is go through situations that you hadn't been through. What happens when you have a lightning delay? What happens? So we'd sit there with a lightning delay on TV, and we'd have 30 minutes of unprepared television, or 45 or an hour, depending on before they start the game back. So they wanted things, and that's where I was so good, because I've been in a rain delay. I've been in a lightning delay. Here's what the guys are doing right now. What's in the coach's mind when a young man is laying out on the field and he's not moving? I've been there. I've had those feelings. What happens in a coach's mind when he wants to go for 2? Do you go at the end of the 3rd quarter, start of the 4th, and why? What happens when you start blitzing all the time? Why did Wisconsin start blitzing all the time? Or why did Michigan start blitzing all the time when they were losing to Wisconsin? If it's not working, change it. So I felt like those were things that I could naturally give back to TV, things that I had lived with for my whole life in coaching.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mack. Thank you very much. I was promised 30 minutes. You gave us over 60, so I'm sure you have things to do. Thank you to Jeremy Sharp as well, who helped set this up. And we would love to have you back when you have time next time.
Yeah, well, this was fun, and it's really important. I appreciate who you are. I appreciate what you do. I love and appreciate you, Angelique, for what you stand for and how you're such a professional in your business. And wish you all good luck and stay safe. I mean, this stuff's tough on all of us. So make sure you take care of yourself and stay healthy.
You too. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil Fisher?
Dave, he knew it'd be 60 minutes. He calls me 2. Everything we do is 2 times as long as I tell him it's going to be.
I'm shocked by that.
Y'all have a good one. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
UNC now. I want to cover UNC.
Yeah, everybody does. Neil Fisher, you had a question for Angelique.
Yeah, well, first of all, Angelique, please forgive me if I get a bit too fanboy here, but I actually live in the Orlando area, but I was born and raised in Detroit, and I've been reading your work for a number of years up there in the news, and I'm also a diehard Michigan fan, even though I've lived the majority of my life here. So I am actually been working 30 years. I moved down here to Florida not only to go to UCF, but I was offered a job at one of the local papers. And I've covered mostly high school sports. And kind of, I guess you say my lifelong dream is I've always wanted to do play-by-play, and I enrolled in Dan Patrick's school here at Full-Sail. And the reason I'm bringing this up is there's actually kind of a overlapping questions, but Stetson University just hired me earlier this week to do some of their play-by-play for in-house productions. And you and Mack were talking about having the trust in the relationship as someone who's been in journalism, not broadcasting, but print. I think that's the most important thing. I've been very lucky that I've been able to build trust because I've covered high school coaches. So my question is, number one, I'm about to go through the process all over again of building trust because, you know, I'm doing the job at Stetson, but also I'm moving from the high school level, which is somewhat different, to the college level. So what advice would you have? You know, are there any differences, similarities?
Oh, I mean, I think there are a lot of differences. I mean, I've covered some high school stuff, and I mean, you know, just on a purely covering a game basis. I mean, you get stats at the college games. You get, you know, the PA guys telling you everything that's going on. You can listen to the radio broadcast. But one thing I always tell, and I'm not equating you to a college journalist, but people who are going into the next level or a different job is I say take the coach out to lunch, or take whoever it is, take the sports information director out to lunch, get to know them. You know, no tape recorder, no notes. You just want to establish a connection. And I think that's really important. I mean, I remember there was a kid who was covering hockey at the college paper at the University of Michigan, and he wanted to break stories. And how do you do it? And so I was telling him, and I said, look, I said, you need to call or write or just give Red Berenson, then the hockey coach, Michigan, say, I want to go to lunch with you. I want to pick your brain on things. And Red Berenson called him and said he had never gotten a note from a journalist before wanting to do that. And that impressed Red. And believe it or not, this kid started getting a little more insight and started breaking stories on the beat. And I'm not saying suddenly you're going to get those gifts, you know, you're not, but I think if they wanted to leak something, it's going to be more likely. Right. But in your position, I think it's about getting to know them, and more importantly, maybe them getting to know you. And I've done that in the summer. The NCAA allows you to take college athletes out for interviews over lunch, and so you can. Okay. And I mean, one of the times I did it was two of the interviews I did. I've become very good friends with them now, long after they've played football. Drew Henson and Mike Hart. We had long lunch interviews, and I mean, I got text messages from both of them the last couple of days, and we really established a good connection. And I know some people say, well, does that make it easy to be critical when they're playing? Well, yeah, they actually, you know, they expect you to be fair and critical. But I think in your position, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. I appreciate that. You know, also too, like I said, it's somewhat different because the coaches at the high school level are all also teachers. And one other thing too, I work as a substitute and tutor at the at the school I cover. So at least logistically, I got it in. You know, I can just text the coach and say, hey, you got 10 minutes on, you know, 2 doors down or whatever. And I know college, it's a much different world in that aspect too.
Oh, it is. And I covered a Tennessee basketball game at Stetson years ago. It's a smaller school, but I don't know what they're like. Michigan's I mean, we jokingly call it Fort Schembechler because it's hard to get in there, and it's really hard. I mean, before I used to be able to call the assistant coaches. I had their direct lines, their cell phones. Not anymore. It's different. But I would imagine, you know, I found that when I do stories on for lack of a better word, smaller programs, they want the right. So I think that, you know, that they're going to be more receptive to whatever it is you want to work on or what kind of stories you want to tell.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for your advice.
Thanks, Neil. Good luck.
Thanks, Neil. we are from, I guess, all over the country, Angelique. I don't know if you know, let's see, I'm looking at Arizona. We had New Mexico, of course, North Carolina, Florida, Jordan's in Arkansas, Kelly, you're in Florida, correct? Sean's in Portland, Oregon. Tim Healy's in Phoenix. John Schrader, where are you? Oh, one more time. Sorry, I thought I was unmuting you, and I muted you.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska. But the prize for farthest away is Kai Dombach, who is in Germany. Kai, go ahead, ask your question.
Wow.
Yes. So I just had to, I'm just, I'm sorry? It's 11.
11, 6 hours. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm curious about something. So I'm in Germany and I work for a German media outlet. I cover the Bundesliga primarily, but sometimes I go abroad to cover games. Like earlier this year, back when we could travel, I covered a soccer game in Japan. Now I'm just curious, at least for in the United States, how comfortable are coaches answering questions that goes to an outlet that isn't in English?
That's a really good question. And I had actually, I was doing some work for ESPN, their NASCAR Now show, and they sent me down to the Tigers to do something. And they asked me to ask the players in Spanish, some of the Spanish-speaking players, to answer for ESPN Deportes. So I had no idea what they were saying because I don't speak Spanish, but they were very comfortable. But to your point, I've seen, again, Jim Harbaugh. I saw a couple reporters. They were from the BBC, so obviously they speak English. And he was like delighted to do an interview with them. I've never seen him so excited to do an interview. So I think he was happy it wasn't with us, but I think he was happy to do the interview. And I saw him in Italy when he took the team to Spain. He was doing interviews with print reporters and television reporters there. And I think he was happy to. So I think, I'm sure you send them the links to the stories afterwards, Kai, maybe. And I think they want to get their message out there. And I think that they, like for someone like Jim Harbaugh, he wants college football to be a global sport. So he wants to talk to reporters overseas. And I honestly have seen him look really delighted when he's done those interviews. So I think that, Mo Wagner, the Wagner brothers playing basketball at Michigan, I think that they've done a lot of interviews in Germany. So I think that that's been, and also their coaches, Juwan Howard and John Beilein as well.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, American football is huge here in Germany. Mm-hmm. A couple years ago, I went to watch the Super Bowl at the hockey arena in Cologne, and it was like 10 euros to get in, and it was sold out, completely sold out. And the game didn't even start until after midnight, didn't get over until 4 or 5 in the morning. So there's a lot, but there's really not much knowledge about the college game. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about reaching out to a few papers or media outlets over here in Germany. Mine has zero interest. They're just like, oh no, that's too American, not for us. But I'm thinking about just reaching out to a few German outlets just to say, hey, there's in some places, college sports are way bigger than NFL, NBA, NHL, way bigger.
Oh,
you need to know about this stuff. Mm-hmm.
Well, Michigan has a defensive lineman, Julius Welschoff from Bavaria. I can't remember. I did a story when he was still in Germany. So they have actually, their coach who recruited him is now at Ohio State. But they've definitely, they love the kid, and on basketball has the Wagner brothers from Germany. So I know there's interest in college sports in Germany. And when my sister lived in Denmark, I've met some kids there who knew everything about college football, and they were playing on club teams in Denmark. And a couple guys I know who played football at Michigan have gone overseas to give clinics and to teach the game because people there are eager to learn. So maybe it's not getting NFL numbers yet, but I think you're right. I think there's definitely an interest there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
And with that, it is 5:15 and it's time for us to go. Angelique, can't thank you enough for doing this. It was, for those of you out there who don't know, Angelique was our 2018 Michigan Sports Writer of the Year and was coming with her husband to Winston-Salem for the awards weekend, and Michigan ended up in the College World Series. And
Yeah, it was last
Angelique
year.
ended up in Omaha.
In Omaha, right? I did. Yeah, that was a really exciting thing to cover. I know everyone tells me the awards are great, so maybe another time, Dave. See what you can.
Absolutely, or we'll do one of these in the meantime. At least virtually, you can be in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Thanks everybody for taking part again. I'm actually on vacation next week, so we're going to skip a week. We'll be back with another one in 2 weeks. So look forward to seeing everybody then. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for including me. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.